Hey listeners, welcome back to Sustainability Street, CPE's podcast on the intersection of commercial real estate and the world we live in. I'm your host, Therese Fitzgerald. For this episode, I had the pleasure of talking about healthy buildings and workplace wellness with Rachel Hodgdon, President and CEO of the International Well Building Institute, which recently announced that adoption of the well building standard now exceeds 6 billion square feet. With the work from home debate still brewing, I wanted to find out what Hodgdon is hearing from employers and how IWBI is helping companies decide what is right for them in the current environment. Just to give you a little sneak peek, Hodgdon said employers and building owners are realizing they have to earn the commute from employees, while recognizing that flexibility can be an important recruitment and retention tool. Here's our conversation. Hi, Rachel. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've seen you speak at a few conferences, so it's very nice to make the personal connection with you. So tell us about your own sustainability journey and your journey to your current role.
Well, back in 2006, I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, working at an interior architecture firm, and got an email that said last chance to register for Greenbuild in Denver. If you live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Denver is a quick 6-hour drive. So drove through a blizzard on the Front Range, showed up in time for the opening plenary, and there was Rick Fedrizzi, the CEO at the time and co-founder of USGBC, talking about the upcoming launch of LEAD for Schools and how this was going to have a transformative impact on education. And I ran to the first session on the topic, put my stuff down in the front row, called my parents and got the answering machine, because this is like 20 years ago, and said, you can stop panicking. I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. I spent 6 months making myself the perfect candidate for that job, got the job, ended up running all of the K-12 and higher education programs, eventually became the founding director of the Center for Green Schools. And then one day Rick walked into my office and said, I've had a great run at USGBC. I'm going to leave to go to an organization that's trying to do the same thing for human health in the built environment as we've been trying to do for planetary health. Would you like to join me? And through the work that I had been doing in schools, I had been seeing that a lot of the strategies that we had prescribed for improving planetary health were actually having a transformative effect on people. Kids that no longer needed their inhalers since coming to their green school, teachers that no longer suffered from the 2:30 headache from being in a non-green building all day. And so I wanted to really see what would happen with a dedicated focus on people. What kind of transformation would we be able to see, not just in schools, but in all building types? So about 10 years ago, having spent about a decade at USGBC, I followed Rick to IWBI. I started out as the chief product officer and then became the president. And about 5 years ago, became the CEO.
That's awesome. So adoption of the well building standard now exceeds 6 billion square feet. What's driving that growth, and how have the drivers evolved over your 10 years?
Yeah, 6 billion square feet blows my mind, because I remember when I announced to my team at IWBI early days that we were going to explore a blueprint to a billion. Like, what would it take for us to get to 1 billion square feet? And people thought I was nuts. So to be now at the 6 billion square foot milestone, nearly 100,000 commercial and residential spaces across 140 countries, I think knocks even our socks off at IWBI. And I think what it really has proven is that there is a tremendous importance to where you sit, your physical environment, and who you sit next to, your social environment. A lot of the early adoption was driven by organizations that wanted to improve recruitment and retention. It was very much viewed as a nice to have as opposed to a must have. But I think with the dawning of ESG as a critical business performance metric, and with the new research that we have seen that demonstrates that healthy buildings have an outsized impact on employee health, well-being, and performance, we've now entered into a kind of must-have stage. And for sure, the pandemic accelerated all of that, because I think every one of us, whether you're a CEO, you're an employee, sitting at the desk, has a far more profound understanding of the ways in which our physical environment impact not just our health and well-being, but like our physical safety. And so I think that put a laser focus on, a set of strategies that you can deploy in the built environment that can have a dramatic impact on everything from business continuity to engagement, sense of belonging, and your ability to get your work done day in and day out. So today, more than 180 companies from Fortune and Global 500s are using Well. And all told, across all in-world spaces, we're impacting about 30 million people every day.
Yeah, that's one of the topics I wanted to focus on. The pandemic definitely raised the awareness about buildings' impact on health and physical health and mental health. But it kind of severed the connection that some people feel to the workplace. So while building owners and CEOs are investing in the workplace, there's some people who still feel they got the flexibility and they want to work from home and they don't want to come back. For some of them, their emotional well-being, they will say, depends on them not coming back full time. Do you agree with that situation?
I definitely think that there are many people who realize that they could work more effectively from home, or that a hybrid scenario ultimately brought them a level of happiness and satisfaction with their jobs that wasn't available to them before. And it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
I think that employers are in a challenging spot trying to figure out what is the best cocktail, what's the best recipe for their businesses. And I think that the most resilient businesses are the ones that are utilizing data to drive their decisions, and then continuing to reflect upon that data, including employee surveys and employee sentiment, to know if they got it right. Like, I think it involves a bit of guessing and checking, because what we know is that if you have a return to office mandate, it's very much the same as if you offer hybrid working. Either way, you have to earn the commute for your employees. If you don't earn the commute by creating a place that is more conducive to at least certain types of work, where employees feel more productive than they could at home, then you're going to lose out in terms of recruitment and retention. If you're requiring butts to be in seats, and if you've got a hybrid, approach, and you're allowing for that kind of flexibility, then you have to convince people that it's a better choice to come into the office than to work from home, at least on some days. And so regardless of what employers choose, there are costs to that choice, because there is now a significant subset of the population that says, I won't even consider a job that has a return to office mandate. So that's going to have an impact on my talent recruitment and retention. And then there's, certainly a significant segment of the population that sees that possibility, that's getting that flexibility, but now can't apply to a certain subset of jobs because it doesn't meet their core criteria. So I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of businesses that are trying to figure out what is the best thing for my business, because I also am of the belief that there are certain jobs, there are certain roles that people have, or functions, where they probably are doing better work with a hybrid approach. I spoke, for instance, to the co-CEO of HOK, one of the world's leading design firms, and he said, you can't schedule creativity. And so I want my people to be where they are their most creative at a time of day where they are their most creative. And that isn't always 9 to 5 sitting in an office.
How can IWBI work with and owners to find that balance?
First of all, I think that if you have an office, IWBI via the Well Building Standard presents many different strategies to create environments that are conducive to the work, that create a better sense of belonging and engagement, that improve not just health and well-being, but cognitive function, which can have a direct impact on productivity. So regardless of what your choice is as an employer, we've got a lot of good solutions for you. But I would say when our clients come to us and are trying to understand what their choices should be, what we suggest is that you have to start by really understanding who are you catering to. And so in many cases, that is who is your employee population and who are you trying to recruit. From there, you can start to design a lot of the most impactful interventions and really have a sense of what will yield the greatest impacts. I think organizations that take that data-driven approach are best set up for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think that you've got to, in the spirit of guessing and checking, ask your employees what's going well for you and what are you looking to change. Like when you implement a really good survey, for instance, that's truly anonymous, people are going to tell you that information. In other words, as an employer, that information is available to me, whether
Mm-hmm.
I can see it right now or not. And I know that that probably sounds really simple, but what we found is that the vast majority of employers skip that step. And so they miss out on that opportunity to actually understand what their employees want from them. And it turns out that what their employees want is dramatically shifting because of all kinds of different externalities and because of the shifts in generations and their preferences coming into the workplace.
So would you say in-office mandates are increasing or flexibility is becoming more the norm?
Well, I think, the pendulum is still swinging and we're waiting for it to get to a place of equilibrium or stillness. I think that, for Fortune 100s, for instance, where you see return to office mandates are the highest, like more than 50% right now, they have the luxury of instituting those mandates because a big part of the draw in coming to work for or staying employed by one of those organizations is the brand affiliation. Those are very desirable organizations to have worked for, to have on your resume. And so I think that you may continue to see with employers that have that advantage, the return to office mandates continue. I think that other organizations that don't have that going for them need to think about what else they offer to supplant it. And flexibility is a big one. In fact, there are many people that have left their current employers or are contemplating leaving their current employers. Some estimates more than half of employees working for those Fortune 500s with return to office mandates are thinking about leaving their job in favor of more flexibility. And so that's a consequence that might be invisible to you by and large as a business, but all of a sudden you have access to a much smaller fraction of the talent pool overall. Is that a good thing for a business? Can they tolerate that or accept that consequence is another question. So I do think that for the time being, you're going to see that the majority of employers will offer some degree of flexibility because they know that that can be their advantage at this moment in time. That's an additional, almost like an amenity, is that flexibility. When I'm making that checklist of pros and cons, many people will say that's a pro. But what we're also seeing is that a lot of the youngest generation that's entering the workforce, like the ones that were doing their senior year of college from their dorm room or missed out on their graduation, their high school graduation ceremony because of COVID, they've actually romanticized the 9 to 5. They're actually leaving their hybrid jobs because they're like, well, I'm in the office, but this office is dead. I want to go into a job where I can be in front of my boss, where I can be seen, where I can be networking, where I can be learning through osmosis. And so, the pendulum is always swinging. In fact, to suggest that it will reach a point of stasis is actually a false expectation. And so I think we're going to continue to see these shifts play out over the next couple of years, and for that matter, over the next couple of decades. And I think what's really interesting in all of that is that there isn't a one size fits all for any organization either. So I would like to think that some organizations have found that hybrid working means that they perform better overall, not just from a talent perspective. For instance, we have many of our employees that are, 1, 2, 3 people in a particular geography, in another part of the world. So they're not going to have an office culture. And what they've told, and increasingly that's the majority of our employees. And so what
Mm-hmm.
they've told us is that to them, the workplace feels far more equitable now that the majority of us are
Mm-hmm.
remote. Imagine when you used to show up like one person on the screen, everybody else in the conference room. That doesn't feel like you can participate equitably in the conversation.
Yes.
And so for us, we actually feel like a hybrid approach has brought a lot of benefits to our work, our team cohesion, our sense of, being a unified, group aligned as a leadership team. And so I don't think we'll ever swing back the other way. And then I think that there are many CEOs that believe that they can't trust their employees to be working
Mm-hmm.
and to be working at their most productive if they're not within their line of sight. And I would contest that perspective and say you probably have other problems that are leading to that.
Mm.
Um, but I do think that there are employers that, so long as they accept the notion that they'll need to optimize their environments to woo people back to provide the most conducive and productive places, will benefit from in-person work. Like for sure, there are things for which in-person is better suited. Collaboration, camaraderie, culture, you got to work a lot harder at those things when you're
Yeah.
working remotely. So there are for sure benefits to businesses that have people back in person. I don't see that one is better than the other in a generalized way, but in a specific kind of way, when you're looking at that particular organization, yeah, there might be something that looks like a right answer for this moment.
Yeah, and I think within every organization, there are probably jobs that just have to be in the office. So you can't offer the same amount of flexibility to everybody. That's a challenge too.
I mean, I think that this is a constant issue that many of us have, that we somehow think that the workplace is all people sitting at desks doing office jobs.
Mm-hmm.
We learned during the pandemic, of course, like there are essential workers that are never sitting at a desk, but have to be in position, in place.
Mm-hmm.
Those have always been there. And then, there are office jobs that we've learned those functions can be performed outside of the office. And that can introduce a lot of opportunity for an organization if they're really leaning into that flexibility. But it also has some implied costs as well. The
Yes.
data will tell you how much those costs are impacting your business.
Tell me more about the tools IWBI offers for figuring out what those right strategies are.
I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, I know I've talked a lot about the importance of understanding the workforce in your organization is experiencing, what they're looking for. And we think the best way to approach that is by utilizing a third-party employee survey. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a network of survey providers that we've cultivated over the years. And they're asking questions not just about your satisfaction with your physical environment, acoustics or thermal comfort, for instance, which are important indicators for a business to tune into, but they're also able to measure for things like belonging, likely risk of turnover, engagement, productivity, perceived physical health, perceived mental health. Like they can measure with high degrees of accuracy to all of these incredible factors that are hugely important for a leader of an organization to have a grasp on. And then the second piece that I think is worth mentioning is that we've recently introduced filters within our scorecards. You can filter for the type of individual that you're trying to recruit into your business in greater numbers or retain. So you could say, I want to improve gender diversity. So show me strategies that are known to have an impact on making the workplace a more welcoming place for women, for instance, or for LGBTQ plus individuals. You can say, I want to create an office environment or a working environment that's more inclusive from a neurological standpoint. So neuro inclusion, I want an office that makes everybody feel that they're welcome and can work at their best, knowing that 1 in 6 people, maybe even more, are neurodivergent in the workplace today. And so this is in many cases almost like an invisible segment of the population that we haven't been particularly tuned into or catering to. And so we'll be able to, with the selection of those filters, help you identify the strategies that, based on the research, matter most for supporting that particular demographic. You can also filter for other things that you're looking for from well, like improving your ESG performance. But when it comes to actually tailoring your strategies to people, first understand who are your people, who are you trying to recruit into the business, and then let's right size strategies that we know will give a boost to those particular populations within the workplace.
Do you have some anecdotes about what certain companies have done to restore the connection to the workplace?
Yeah. One of the favorite examples that I have of a company that I think has done a lot of things right is Citi. They are engaged in our Well at Scale program, so their entire global real estate portfolio of 2,500 locations participates. But at their global headquarters in Manhattan, they've gone all the way to achieving a WELL Platinum designation. And it is one of the largest WELL certified workplaces in the world. They've deployed many really cool health features throughout the building. A lot of it is focused on creating a sense of connection to place and a sense of connection to culture, more places for people to gather impromptu and more places to gather formally. They say when I was touring with their head of facilities, I asked, what's been the impact that this has had on recruitment and retention? He said, we think of this office as one giant recruitment mechanism. And we hear from many of our new hires that they specifically left their old jobs and applied for this one because they wanted to work in this space. And of course, for Citi, especially when you think about, the bankers on the floor, you have to be thinking about every opportunity that you possibly can to improve productivity. And whether people know about those strategies or simply experience them in a visceral sense, they make a big difference. So improvements to air quality, improvements to acoustics, improvements to daylighting and access to views, all of these things can have a significant impact on productivity, and they just make us feel better. I think that a lot of the early examples of people loading up their offices with amenities were designed to get people to stay longer. Eat unlimited food in the cafeteria, sleep in the sleep pods. You don't even have to go home. And now what we're seeing from employers like Citi is that they're focused on enhancements to the office environment that help people to work smarter, that help people to work better. And so they're taking an evidence-based approach via the WELL standard to be able to do that.
That's really maximizing the value of your office
and maximizing the productivity of every hour spent in the office. Like I believe, and I think the research supports this, that productivity is not a straight line. There is not a direct correlation between the number of hours that you put in and the amount of productivity that you get out. Not in most industries, certainly not in most high earning positions. And so you want people to work more productively with the hours that they have, right, not necessarily work longer, but in a less productive fashion.
Yeah, I think my listeners, being real estate people, would be interested in hearing about the ROI of investing in wellness. Can you share some of that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this is one of the places where we've been able to make the most progress over the last decade is making data available to the research community for third-party independent studies. And a recent, what I would call seminal study, a longitudinal study of well-certified spaces in North America, found nearly a 30% improvement in overall satisfaction with the workplace, from 42% to 70%. Wow. A 10% increase in reported mental health, improvements to reported physical health, a 26% overall increase in reported well-being scores, and a 10-point jump in median productivity scores. Like, those results are pretty mind-blowing. Like, researchers look at that data and go, are you serious? But it's not any one strategy that we're talking about. It is every single strategy that you have put into place to rack up enough points to earn a WELL certification. And each of those strategies is backed by evidence to have a meaningful impact on human experience, human productivity, and human health.
And what do you think is the next frontier in workplace wellness? What are some of the untapped opportunities?
Well, you asked about ROI,
Hmm.
and I think that what we are seeing from our customers is that 10 years ago, the question that we got most often is what is the ROI of a well certification, or what is the ROI of a
Hmm.
healthy building? And the stats that I just cited for you speak to that question, are essentially a way of answering that question. What we are now hearing from our customers is what is the return on investment for my space, for my building, for my
Hmm.
organization? And that's where it occurs to us that we have all of the data between our customers and IWBI to actually yield those answers down to the level of the asset. But the data right now is not harmonized. So a big part of the effort that we're making over the next couple of years with our customers and with our partners is to harmonize these different data streams that speak to the perceptions of the office or of the workplace by employees, the validated strategies that have been implemented through well, and performance based results. So performance testing that's happening on site or continuous monitoring through sensor technologies. And this gives us a landscape of data when integrated that allows us to start to understand you did these things and these things happened, or you implemented these strategies and saw real improvements, for instance, to air quality, but you didn't see perceptions of air quality improve. What
Mm.
is happening? Let's start to leverage this data as a kind of diagnostic. So I think that we're getting to a place where we expect to have these kinds of insights at the level of the asset, and we expect them in real time or something close to it. And I think that's like a major evolution that's happening within workplace well-being and within the real estate community more broadly, is just this expectation that I can be in real-time conversation with my building and real-time conversation with my people. And with some AI and machine learning capabilities, I actually think that that is possible.
Yeah. Have you seen AI move the needle at all, or?
I think it is not the norm, but the exception right now. I think that the technology is emergent, and as a result, it can be pretty cost prohibitive. But the early experimentation that we're seeing in certain areas of AI is really, really exciting. For instance, AI deployed around the notion of continuous monitoring
Hmm.
can can start to help you to understand immediately when is a sensor down, why am I seeing this spike in CO2, and automate the controls of the building so that it isn't like the facilities manager gets a call and is like, quick, bump up the ventilation. That's all happening in an automated fashion.
Yeah.
We see those things happening much more frequently and becoming a best practice in certain parts of Asia, for instance. Like China is really ahead of the game when it comes to leveraging continuous monitoring for building controls.
Hmm.
I think that it's going to take us some years before we see that become best practice and before that comes at a cost that most building owners and operators can really stomach. But it's really exciting.
Hmm.
And from a sustainability perspective, what's even more interesting is that the companies that are doing some of this early experimentation are saying when we just control for efficiency and sustainability, like here's how much we can expect to reduce our operating costs by, reduce our utility costs by. When we add this human health consideration, and when we add these real-time insights, we can achieve 15% on top of that.
Wow.
Why? Because we're only heating the spaces when people are in them. We're only conditioning the spaces when they're occupied and CO2 levels are going to increase. We're only turning the lights on when people are in the room. Like these are very practical solutions. When deployed, imagine how much more efficiency you can get out of the space. So human health becomes an important consideration, or rather controls that are calibrated for human health becomes an important consideration for meeting your decarbonization goals.
This is really fascinating. I always ask my guests what they're reading or what they're
Mm.
listening to that would inform on this topic. So I'm sure IWBI has some publications. So tell us a little bit about those, and then anything outside of that that you can recommend.
I will. So let me start, since you invited me to do a little shameless self-promotion,
Sure.
with plugging the upcoming release of our Investing in Health Pays Back second edition special report. This is an aggregation of all of the best data and all of the best insights that we have as it pertains to the return on investment, not just of healthy buildings or well-certified buildings, wholesale, but of individual health-focused strategies. Like, what kinds of gains could you expect from improving acoustics or improving lighting quality, for instance? All the best third-party research summarized for the layperson and fully cited inside of this report. It's completely free. It may not be a riveting read, but it is such great fodder if you're that person who's trying to make the case, whether it's to a client that you're trying to win over or to your own internal stakeholders. And I think that becomes vitally important, as for so many advocating for sustainability, the crush of coming into compliance with decarbonation regulations may start to make investments in healthy buildings look like a nice to have, when we know that from a wholesale business impact, they're a must have. And then I would say the Sustainable Human podcast is a podcast produced by one of our survey partners. Her name is Linda Jarnum. She runs a company called Flow to Thrive, and she has a lot of amazing insights around brain health and organizational success that's very much rooted in practical approaches to data-driven decisions. And so I would definitely recommend that. IWVI has a Well Executive webcast series where we're getting to hear from leaders in sustainability, but talking less about their work in sustainability and more about what they do to maintain their own health and well-being and maintain their own peak performance. So we've had incredible guests like former US Surgeon General Dr. Richard Carmona talking about what he learned as a member of the military that's helped him to become a high-functioning executive. And then amazing insights from someone like Yasushi Kinoshita, who is a member of our governance council and wears several hats. Insights that he shared was that for the first time through this conversation that we're having around returning to office, the residential market is competing with commercial office space. And like that observation alone has had me thinking for weeks.
How so? How are they competing?
Because now, as a person, I'm making a choice between working from home and when I purchase a house, I'm thinking about it also as a workplace.
Okay.
But if I have a really conducive environment at home, I'm much less likely to seek out an office job. You know, a lot of the people that we saw consistently coming into the office at our organization are those that don't have a space that is conducive to work. So now when people go and make home buying decisions, they're looking for that home to cater to them, not just for, you know, living their life and, you know, caring for their families and going to sleep, but also as a workplace. And then, you know, as I'm deciding what job I'm going to take, I may be far less interested in organization that requires me to come back to work, regardless of what the amenities are, if I have a space that's outfitted in a way that makes me feel that I can work at my best. You know, with an organization that has a flexible return to work, I'm asking myself, why would I go into the office? Like, I can make my own food here. I won't lose an hour and a half in the commute. I can, you know, have zero transition time between meetings. That puts a far greater expectation on commercial offices in terms of what they deliver. And we're seeing that play out, that the majority of corporate occupiers are saying, we demand more amenities and we're willing to pay more. And we're going to leave those offices, those office spaces that don't provide us with the bells and whistles that compel people to come into work every day.
Anything else that you're reading?
Anything else
on your own,
well,
outside of the office? Or?
I'm getting ready to start a podcast of my own, which I find to be a very daunting exercise on many different levels. And so I've actually been spending a lot of time listening to mainstream podcasts to understand what are the approaches that they're taking to garnering far greater mainstream audiences. So I think in some ways there's like a lot for us to learn in the sustainability space by taking a deeper look at what's happening in mainstream media and drawing those bigger crowds. Because in the words of one of my former colleagues at USGBC, the sustainability community can be something of a self-licking ice cream cone. How are we going to leverage something like a podcast to dramatically expand our reach, and to inculcate people in the values and the opportunities associated with sustainability? I think in order to do that, we have to look outside of the movement and outside of the topical area.
I'd love to
So,
talk to you about podcasts sometime.
yeah, I mean, I turned on Call Her Daddy the other day to get
Uh-huh.
some insights into my own podcast, which may seem really counterintuitive, but
No, yeah,
I felt like, oh, wow, that is really a good way to do an
yeah,
interview.
right. All right. Well, Rachel, thank you so much. It was great to
Thank
meet you.
you.
And I'm really interested in your organization, and I'll
Thank
continue to
you.
watch what's going
All
on.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
stay tuned.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Okay.
having me.
And thank you, listeners, for joining me on Sustainability Street. If you have any questions about this episode or suggestions for future episodes, please reach out to me at therese.fitzgerald@cpe-mhn.com. Bye for now.